Oh, see? What's that? Make sure everyone's muted, yeah. Let's make sure that I am spotlighted. And okay, well, we'll just work with what we got. Okay, welcome. Jason Murphy, Wednesday night. Rebel Dharma Group. Nice to see those of you who are here and those of you online. Yeah, why don't we, well, we're just going to kind of jump in today. Normally I would have you guys do a little bit of a kind of introduction, but I feel like everyone kind of knows each other, and at least maybe we'll have some discussion a little bit later on, some breakout groups or something. Today I'm going to focus on the kind of second noble truth. Last time I was here, which was 2 weeks ago, I kind of gave an overview of a little bit like the Buddha story and the kind of formation of the Four Noble Truths, and the first noble truth, kind of went over the first noble truth. And the second noble truth, I'm going to kind of delve in, unpack a little bit more today, both for those of you in the room and for those of you at home. But before that, let's just go ahead and meditate. All right. So is there anyone new? Anyone new to the group? Hey. How you doing? Jason.
Jonathan, nice to meet you.
Hey, Jonathan. Nice to meet you. Have you ever done any kind of meditation before?
What kind of meditation?
Any kind of
Oh,
meditation.
yeah, I've done some meditation.
Okay. Great. All right. Okay. So I'll give a little bit of instruction. I'm feeling kind of under the weather. I'm fighting off something. I have a bit of a cold, so we'll see how much talking I do. I think I'll be all right. Let's go ahead and just finding a posture that's workable, that's sustainable, where you could feel relaxed and alert. And just to begin, sorry, that might happen. Just to begin, just establishing your awareness here in the body, here in this moment in time. Coming into contact with the experience of breathing. Just recognizing whatever's happening in the body and the mind. Even recognizing what's happening in the external world. in your surroundings, in your environment. Some sense of acknowledgement of the mind states, the sensations or physical states, and the environmental states. And then in some way, just allowing those different states to be in the background of your attention. We're not trying to shut them down or shut them off. We're just not going to emphasize. Instead, emphasizing the experience of breathing, whether at the tip of the nose, the rise and fall of the belly, or the expansion and contraction of the chest. In this practice, we're just using the breath as an anchor, as a meditation object. So picking a point where it's easy to make contact and sustain contact. So once we've established some mindfulness of breathing, the goal is to maintain knowing that the attention will wander off, will be kind of distracted or pulled away. It's just the mind. It's just the other senses kind of vying for attention. It's not a problem. It's just a process. In this practice, one of the things we're really trying to do here is to recognize when the attention wanders off and then re-establish mindful attention of the breath or this experience of breathing over and over again, becoming more and more curious of the process of breathing, the experience of breathing. While at the same time allowing the breath to be natural. We're not trying to effort the breath or force the breath or hold the breath or do anything weird with it. Just observing the process of breathing. again and again. Just recognizing when the attention wanders off. And with that sense of friendliness or kindness with the mind, aiming the attention back. Establishing and re-establishing mindfulness of breathing. This present time experience. Recognizing whatever else is happening, thoughts or sounds or sensations. Accepting that there's multiple things happening right here, right now. And in some way, non-identifying with all the other processes. Just investigating this experience of breathing. Allowing the other processes, the other senses to just be in the background. An invitation could be to explore the full aspect of the breath, the beginning, the middle, the end. The space between the breath. Without getting too analytical, really just being experiential. What's happening here, this breath? Again and again. Recognizing if the attention has wandered off. And with that sense of friendliness or kindness with the mind, re-establishing mindfulness of the breath, mindfulness of breathing, awareness of the full process of the breath. Perhaps even asking, are you breathing or is breath happening? Are you aware of the breath or is awareness happening? Just another process. the invitation for the next few moments is to expand the awareness from this kind of breath centered to really more of a global of just awareness of present time experience, all that is arising, all that is passing. Including, but not limited to, the experience of breathing. Okay. So what I'm thinking I'll do now is actually we'll just kind of jump into a topic, and I'm going to give you I'm going to invite you to get into small groups, and maybe those of you online will just get into one group, and in this room maybe there may be two groups. And so I'm going to read a passage. This is a definition of the second noble truth from Ajahn Amaro. Ajahn Amaro is the kind of, second in command. If the Thai forest tradition was like the mafia, Sumedho, Ajahn Sumedho, which means like kind of teaching monk. Sumedho would be like the godfather, and Amaro would be like a kappa, like a second down, in charge of, and then each of the kind of, each of the long-term teaching or training monks have like an area, like a section, right? Like, so they're abbots or they're in charge of a certain area. And Ajahn Amaro used to be in charge of kind of, a monastery in Northern California where I spent a lot of time when I was younger. It's called Abhayagiri, which means fearless mountain. and that's up north still. There's a different capo there now. His name's Passano, Arjan Passano, also one of my teachers. But anyway, Arjan Amaro is now in England, like Chithurst, somewhere around there. Anyway, this is one of his descriptions of the second noble truth, craving. This, monks, is the noble truth of the cause of suffering. It is that craving, compelling, intoxicating, which causes us to be born into things again and again, ever seeking fresh delight, now here, now there. It is namely the craving for sensual delight, the craving to be something, and the craving to feel nothing. So let's, well, I'll read it again. Okay. This, monks, is the noble truth of the cause of suffering. It is that craving, compelling, intoxicating, which causes us to be born into things again and again, ever seeking fresh delight, now here, now there. It is namely the craving for sensual delight, the craving to be something, and the craving to feel nothing. All right, so I'd like for you to break off into groups, and how about we just kind of like you three and then you four, you can just talk about what does that mean to you? What came up for you about that? We'll just take a few minutes, and then let's go ahead and yes. Did everyone leave? No, good. They're just off. All right. Let's come back to the room, to the group as a whole. And I'm curious what came up for people, have maybe a little discussion about it. I know maybe it wasn't, it's a provocative kind of statement, teaching, and there can be a lot of nuance to it, as with most of the Buddhist teachings. It's both simple and straightforward and also nuanced, right? But yeah, I'm just curious. And then we all have our own perception of what might have been meant by the different statement. So I'm just curious, does anyone want to share what came up? And if you're talking about in your small group, you could talk generally about what was discussed in the group, but try to keep it focused on your own. Yeah.
Yeah, I was something we were just talking about, like after I reflected on it a little bit, I was thinking about a question I thought I would kind of pose, which is like the craving for freedom, or more like, I know like the craving for material things, or like I'll be happy when, be unhealthy, but the craving for, and I think there might be something in the Buddhist teachings that says like something about like the craving for liberation is the only healthy thing. Do you feel like that's accurate, or is?
Yeah, so the kind of question or statement and like thought was about like, so the idea of craving, what's kind of healthy craving? Is there a healthy craving? This is a question you've kind of posed before, like in a different kind of way. It has to, and this idea of kind of craving and desire. Also, there's another word that gets used a lot, striving versus non-striving. Like, what is healthy striving versus kind of non-healthy striving, or what is useful versus kind of non-useful. I think I'll address it as I kind of unpack this statement a little bit. And but if not, can we come back? Let's loop back around to that. Okay, because it's a great question, and it deserves more than just a quick little answer. So I want to hear what other people have to say as well. Go ahead, Mike, or Shannon. No, Mike, yeah.
I guess reflecting on the reading, or second noble truth, like this, just saying, like I guess the thing that popped up in my mind was like abandoning, like wanting to strive or become or chase sense pleasures, or abandon that repetitive craving is that the extinguishment of all those things is like what they call nirvana, or like a lot of the guides in the lineage will say the gates of the deathless are now open, like Ajahn Sumedho, for example, and that used to just befuddle me. And now I think it means that, in this moment, here and now, if you can, abide in the way it is, how things are, and turn toward them and have acceptance and just not always be, caught up in craving, you can, not incarnate over and over again into behaviors that are dead end roads, or are unskillful, or lead you down the primrose path. Like being in addiction, like being in recovery rather from addiction, like this really resonates with me, because I've had a lot of unskillful behavior and hit all the dead end roads as a result. So this message really like resonates with me, that if you abandon like that craving, and abide in mindfulness of the Dharma, you can just kind of, be free. So that was just some of my thoughts.
Okay, great. Great, yeah. What about this group?
Yeah, I mean, this actually just came up after our conversation with something you kind of talked about on Monday too. Like, there's so many like compulsive like movements in our body that we just fidget and stuff,
Mm.
and like it is like a craving, I guess, to like shift.
Mhm.
And I've just been trying to be more aware of that, I guess, since Monday, like how it's like not even like a conscious thing that like I'll just like move my hand or like just stretch, like I feel like mastering that is like, I don't know, it's like a good exercise for like the hard stuff in your
Mhm.
head.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. So that the paying attention to the kind of non-volitional movements or actions that are even happening in the mind or physically that are happening, like scratches, itches, subtle feelings of discomfort that we experience. This is one of the beauties of practice, is that we become acutely aware of what's actually going on, and it's not always pleasant, and yeah, so utilizing that it is a discipline, um, and when I was kind of new in practice, like the first, I don't know, 5 years or so, I was extremely disciplined in that kind of concept of sit still, stillness, and I really wanted, I was like, if I can keep my body extremely still and not move, then that would eventually happen to my mind. And it's true, it did. One did lead to the recognition, like you're saying, if I don't scratch that itch, then I'm being less compulsive and impulsive. And then that's helping the mind to calm, right? And be present, even when it's uncomfortable. So yeah, that's really working on like understanding craving and our kind of compulsive or impulsive desire to satisfy craving, so that's a great example of that. Yeah. All right, well, I'm going to get into I'm going to kind of break down a little bit this second noble truth, and then hopefully in doing so kind of at least addressing your question, Dustin, and then I'll open up again for kind of questions and whatnot. So, I mean, I ever since I first heard this teaching, this translation of the second noble truth, it just has made a lot of sense to me and helped me really kind of understand, because there's some really poignant things, right? So what is the cause of suffering? It is that craving, that compelling, that intoxicating, that which causes us to be born into things again and again. So what does that mean? To be born. So this craving, compelling, intoxicating, this is a lot of times what we would call addiction, or seeking of pleasurable experience, right? That causes us to be born into things again and again. Like that's, I don't even fully know what that means, but I have some thoughts about it. Ever seeking fresh delight, so newness, novelty, right? Can I make whatever I experienced before better this time? Can I get to the next level of the video game, right? So now here, now there. So this kind of fluttery mind, kind of constantly seeking. So the craving for sensual delight, the craving to be something, and the craving to feel nothing. So this grasping or craving to become It's part of the kind of process here. And then or to numb. So to become or to numb, right? This is the tendency of most kind of forms of addiction. All right, so the first thing I think to address is what we call tanha. So tanha is the Buddhist word for craving, but it has a few translations: craving, thirst, attachment, grasping, and desire. So these are some different ways in which it's kind of talked about. The word tanha is used to describe that which causes suffering. That one of my favorite translations is the unquenchable thirst. And if you think about something that you've really been obsessed about, it's like kind of never quite satisfied. Like, when is it fully satisfied? When is your obsession fully satisfied? And I've noticed this with pleasure seeking, and I've also noticed this with kind of negative kind of core belief, or negative like anxiety, like worry and anxiety. When does that ever satisfy? When is worry and anxiety satisfied? Have you ever had that be satisfied? Those of you who maybe suffer from anxiety or worry. But just to think about it. Or is it constantly moving forward, constantly looking ahead? Okay, now that's happened, but what about this? But what about that? But what about this? But what about that? But what about next time? You know, so it seems like it's constant, it's just out of reach. So this is a way of talking about striving too. Okay, so the Buddha gave really instructions for each of the noble truths. So the noble truths aren't just statements, right? And what are the noble truths? So I'll kind of just repeat them all just so we can kind of talk about them. So the first noble truth is that there is suffering in this world, to acknowledge that. And the second noble truth is that there's a cause of suffering, which is what we're talking about: craving, tanha, grasping, attachment. Third noble truth is that there is a freedom that can be found. So the relinquishing of craving is possible. The fourth noble truth is that there is a kind of known and predictable course of how to do that. Kind of as Mike kind of described this state of kind of deathlessness, right? This is a seemingly complicated kind of statement of like the gates to the deathless, or the doors to the deathless, are open. In other words, if we're not being born again into things, this kind of craving for life, craving for existence, craving to have, craving to be, and we're not pushing away the reality of death, then we are in a place known as the deathless. So in between craving and aversion is a place known as the deathless, right? So that's kind of, or, you know, nibbana, a lack of striving. All right, so three aspects. There's three aspects that the Buddha gave for all of the noble truths, right? There is an origin of suffering, right? So to know that there's suffering, and then which is attachment and craving. And then so awareness of that. Okay, there's an origin of suffering. Having the awareness of that, really experientially knowing that. And then craving should be let go of. So recognizing, okay, the freedom that is promised by Buddhism, it comes from the relinquishing of craving. And then craving has been let go of. So this is kind of the third recognition of like, oh, recognizing when craving has been let go of. Let's use a very simple example. Itch, scratch, right? So there's a craving that arises to scratch an itch. There's an itch, and there's another itch that arises. Now, if we just recognize the itch, know that it's there, but we don't get caught up in having to deal with it or do anything about it, just allow it to be, then it will stay as long as it's going to stay, and it will eventually kind of subside. More often than not. I mean, I'm pretty much sure that it happened. I don't know that I've really been fully aware for every itch that's ever arisen that I didn't scratch. Did it go away? But I have been aware of when I felt compelled to scratch, or compelled to move, or compelled to, kind of succumb to the craving. But what this is saying is to recognize when it's arising. So recognizing like the itch or the scratch, right? And then recognizing that it subsides. So we're kind of aware of the whole process, and we can do this with everything in our mind. When we can get clear enough. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is that there's three kinds of desire. So there, and this is also what's been talked about in the statement, the teaching. Craving for sense pleasure, craving to become someone, and then craving to get rid of something or some aspect of who we are even. And even sometimes it's get rid of negative thoughts, or get rid of parts of who we are, that kind of thing. So there's the craving for sense pleasure, right? Craving to experience pleasurable thoughts, smelling, sight, touch, taste, hearing, and even thinking that which is pleasing. So if you reflect on kind of eating, like the process of eating is generally about pleasure seeking. Sometimes for some people, it's just the act of eating, right? It's just I'm giving nutrition to this body. And this is actually when I was training in monasteries, and that was a big thing in the tradition to not actually enjoy your food, enjoy it enough, but to really just see it. And there was like this whole meditative reflection on I see this food as the nourishment to continue to allow this body to practice, to liberate the mind. And that's it. That's the focus. And sometimes, but of course, I was like, ooh, I want this and I want that. Every time you get one bowl, and you have to put all the things. And sometimes I would try to separate, like there was like a sweet cake next to like a fish head, you know what I mean? And I would be like, let's try to get some noodles or something in between there, so I can really enjoy the cake, instead of, that there was a lot of efforting involved, and craving involved. And then one of the teachings that Ajahn Chah would give, Ajahn Chah is the kind of lineage holder of this Thai forest lineage. And he would instruct the monks, when he would start to see that they were doing what I was describing, he would instruct them to kind of soup, to like just kind of turn all of their food in the one bowl, just so it all mixes in together, and just to have preferenceless, a lack of preference for what they eat, as a practice of letting go, because there's some ego involved there. Right? So we don't have to do that extreme, but I did do this practice where there was another guy who was a novice monk, and we, as a practice, he was a Thai guy, and I not a Thai guy, and we had different food preferences for sure. And what we would do, we did this a couple times, is I would go down the food line, this food's offered, and then there's like lots of different kind of options, and I would get the things that I kind of liked, and he would get the things that he liked, and we would sit down and we would switch bowls, and then I would eat whatever he liked, and he would eat whatever I liked, and sometimes it was unpleasant. And sometimes it was, it was that reflection of letting go of I want this, like, to be a particular way. And I think there's lots of ways we can reflect on eating that is about the sustenance of this body, and not necessarily for pleasure. And just watching our preferences, even just watching our preferences. So there's lots of ways we can kind of use this kind of sense pleasure seeking in our kind of consumption, kind of food consumption. All right, so another aspect that's kind of talked about here is becoming. So there's sense pleasure, then there's this kind of becoming. We get caught in the realm of ambition or attainment, right? So the desire to become something, to be the best at blank, right? And this we can get caught in, and we get caught in the movement, right? Striving to become happy, or striving to become, and even this kind of idea of liberation, striving to become liberated. If we're attached to the outcome, it can really get in the way. Is what the teaching is here. So seeking to become wealthy, or to make our life feel important by endeavoring to make the world right. So these are two things. The one is like seeking to become wealthy. So this is very greed based, it's very ego based. I also want to just acknowledge, it also can be very like, I grew up not having much, and I want to be successful in my life. But if being successful or being wealthy is the goal, then that's craving. That is going to cause a lot of suffering. Being wealthy doesn't actually relieve suffering. The Buddha found that out 600 years ago, but because he was wealthy, and he would still suffer. And so did a lot of his family. And we see this all the time when we see, even just like in the media, or, people who have, millions of dollars, and, that own those, $7 million homes in Bel Air or whatever, and they're, not happy, ending their life, or ending up in rehab, or still in the throes of addiction, right? So that's one aspect. And then the other aspect is the making our life feel important by endeavoring to make the world right. So this is like world peace, like striving for world peace. Now, not to make a difference. I think that there's a balance here, learning how to, again, just like the wealth, right? So living healthy, living comfortably, living in a way where we can sustain. But if we're, hell bent on, being the next famous blah, 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 or the, best-selling author, or having the, whatever, the coolest app that gets like, bought out by, whatever, Google or something, then that can really, if that doesn't happen, then what does that mean? That where's our worth if that's all we've put our worth into? So that's one of the ways I think that this teaching is kind of leaning to. And then the other thing is like this kind of, becoming something other than what we are right now. So this is kind of, or this feeling important, or endeavoring to make the world right. So we avoid whatever's happening within ourselves, and we're so externalized in making the world right, and we lose track in how do we actually find peace within ourselves. And again, I think that there's a balance here to be struck, because it is important to like speak out against violence, or speak out against racism, or speak out against oppression. This is useful, and this is something that, but without the needing to, that this is going to consume my life completely. And that this is the only way I'm going to find peace or happiness, is if the world is at peace. That's surely going to cause suffering, because when has that ever happened? Okay, so to note that this is all an attempt to become something other than what we are right now. So this kind of grasping, this becoming, this sense pleasure is in essence about not accepting or not being in where we're at. So becoming something other than what we are right now. So there's a couple examples that I give here. You know, I want to practice meditation so I can become free from pain. So I want to become free from pain, or I want to become enlightened. Right? I want to enjoy sense pleasure without having to give up anything else and still become enlightened. Right? So this is that kind of cake and eat it too. You know. Now there's the other side of this, which is the get rid of, and this is a little bit like that kind of the world peace example. I want to get rid of world hunger. Okay, is that even possible to get rid of world hunger? And is the recognition of that goal, and to what end, you know, are we trying to get rid of world hunger, you know, or get rid of poverty, you know? So when we get kind of disillusioned with trying to become something, then there can be this other desire to get rid of things. And this, I'm really talking about getting rid of kind of certain aspects. Like I want to get rid of my suffering. I want to get rid of my anger or jealousy or fear or anxiety. So this is like pushing it aside. So the teaching here and the practice, I think, is instead of trying to get rid of, you know, we're kind of acknowledging. It's like this. Oh, anger is like this. Even just that strong desire to want to, you know, save the world. Acknowledging it. This is fine. This is good. But also seeing that, you know, what, like how is that manifesting? It feels like I want to get rid of something. If it's like, so this is what feeling like I want to get rid of something within me is like. So there's that recognition. So if I get rid of, so this is another one, like kind of example. If I get rid of or conquer my desires, this is just another craving. It's craving to achieve, craving to accomplish. And from the Buddhist perspective, this just continues this kind of the cycle of grasping and death and rebirth, being born into things again and again. So I guess I kind of want to pause there because I feel like there might be a question or two or a thought. Any thought, question, comment?
Like back to my original question about, you know, striving for freedom, but then you were talking about, you know, wanting to get rid of certain things. That made me think of like, what about, you know, for if you have like childhood traumas or fears and stuff like that, you know, shouldn't you want to get rid of those?
So the difference here, great question and clarification. The difference here is letting go of the idea of the aversion of wanting to get rid of or to grasp to achieve. So it's getting rid. It's kind of recognizing that those polarities are ultimately just causing more suffering, more craving, right? Yeah. So instead, this idea of like acknowledging, you know, there is suffering, or acknowledging there is trauma, and this trauma needs to be understood, recognized, and then seeing that it can arise and that it can pass away, just like craving, just like everything else. So that idea, and it's also, again, like there are healthy desires, you know. This is a little bit to your question. The Buddha kind of gave like 10. He gave kind of 10 specifics on healthy and unhealthy, or skillful and unskillful desires. And it basically boils down to when we're gaining in enough mindful awareness, attention, when we're kind of feeling settled enough in this practice, then we can begin to discern, is this desire, is it a healthy desire? Does it lead to healthy results? Or is it an unhealthy desire? And does it lead to unhealthy results? Right. And so by watching our mind and by watching our kind of striving, because this is something that we have to like acknowledge, which is that the mind is fucking tricky and are addictive or craving. Like we'll start to rationalize and justify how, even though we know the thing that leads to the bad result is going to go that direction, there's still a part of our mind, this is, you know, what the Buddha called Mara, that will try to rationalize how that's okay. Like it's okay to do that thing that you know is going to cause harm to yourself or somebody else because they did that to me, or because, you know, because of this happened to me when I was young. You know, there's all kinds of stories that we create. So this is like the kind of danger zone, right? And so this idea of skillful versus unskillful. So to recognize, okay, does this, like, even when we do a thing, we make a decision, we're volitional. It's not non-volitional. So like just impulsively scratching the itch is non-volitional. Volitional is like, I have an itch. I want to try not to scratch it. And then I'm going to scratch the itch. And then I'm scratching the itch. So that is volitional. So we're aware of it. We're not just impulsively reacting. And so there's benefit there, because that's where we can learn, even though we don't, it may be like, oh, okay, what happened there? Well, the itch went away for just a second or two, and then I got 3 other itches as a result, right? That's usually what happens, something like that. So that the craving might increase. If we feed the craving might increase. So let's see. Do you feel like I addressed that?
Yeah.
Please. It is just so Ajahn Amaro has written lots of books, and they are almost all available either at Abhayagiri or at I forget what it's called. Well, Chithurst Monastery. What's it called? The Amaro's
Amravati.
Amaravati. Thanks, Mike. I can always rely on Mike. Well, there's quite a few. Here's one right here, actually. This one is called Who's Pulling the Strings? And it's this was about equanimity, but there's a whole series that he did about lots of different, like all of the different I mean, I can give you some kind of offline, like there's so, like literally so many books, because what they do is they give Dharma talks. So as I'm giving this Dharma talk, or I'm giving a series of Dharma talks on the Four Noble Truths, then they record them, and they transcribe them, and they turn them into a book, and then they distribute them to the world. So if you just go, so there isn't really any one specific, there's like literally thousands. So any of them will be good. That's the reality. Yeah. Grasping is suffering. There's this line, you know, the craving to feel nothing. More grasping, more suffering. Even the craving to get rid of whatever the kind of state that we don't want to experience is. This is craving. This is suffering. This is wanting things to be other than they are. Definition: wanting things to be other than they are is suffering. Now, we can want things to be other than they are and not be attached to it, and see what that's like. And we can still, I think, put good effort into the world, like to stop world hunger, for example, or poverty, or some of these really big, kind of problems, right? Access to mental health, something like that. But can we do it without the grasping, without the needing it to be other than it is, right? But that's what the Buddha is saying is the difference between suffering and not suffering. Something else here I was going to talk about. Yeah, so instead of, trying to get rid of, right, whether it's world hunger or our own, kind of thoughts or feelings, or our current situation, instead of trying to get rid of it, we acknowledge it, right? It's like this. I'm not trying to get rid of something, but instead acknowledging, and then even there's this whole thing about letting go. Like sometimes letting go is like, okay, well, if I can let go of the grasp that I have on a feeling, on a situation, on an itch, right? On a pain in the body, on a thought in the mind, if I can just let it be, what happens to it? So letting go is part of the process, but then we also have to learn to let it be. And this is, again, a great example of this is how do we work with pain, physical pain, emotional pain. By trying to get rid of it, we're actually really just like stoking the flame, like causing it to be more agitating. But if we allow it to be, it will eventually die down. And it's not helpful to beat ourselves up when we have desires, of course we have desire. And this is what I love about this teaching, is that this teaching isn't saying desire is bad. It's saying be aware of what desire is wholesome versus what desire is unwholesome. What desire is skillful versus unskillful. And then the thing to really pay attention to is the craving. Like when that craving, that compelling piece comes up. So what we're trying to do is not identify with the craving, but kind of disidentify. It's about recognizing desire. Yeah.
Do you say craving is just like a more impulsive form of desire? Are they synonymous, or is there like a distinction?
I feel like there is a distinction in experience. Because of what you're saying, craving feels much more. So if we're not aware of it, craving, desire, there's no space between the two. But from the Buddhist teachings and from, I think a lot of the addiction, kind of counseling and addiction kind of theory also talks about we can have a thought and not an action. We can have a desire and not a craving, or not act out on a craving. But we can have a desire and a craving, but then still renounce that craving, not act out on it, right? And so, the difference between having a desire in our mind and a craving in our mind and then not acting out on it, I don't know, But the space between the desire and the action, or the volitional action, if we're aware, for non-volitional is just happening, right? And that's basically what the Buddha called the uninstructed worldling, the person who's just, feeding their desires left and right, every desire they have, without any regard to themselves or other people. This is what we call addiction. This is what we call ignorance. This is a lack of compassion, actually. So, Okay, so there's just another little section about this, which is about letting go. I think I kind of already started to go into it. So if we can listen to our desires, right, with wisdom and not craving, they can lead to great insight. So we can look at our desires, positive, and even the helpful or unhelpful. We can even see the unhelpful desire and go like, oh, like, where's that coming from? Like I had a situation recently where there was someone that they just kept wanting to have a particular thing be a particular way. And they were really anxious about it. And we were able to see, okay, so what is this desire? So this desire was for safety and trust. Oh, this person wishes to have safety and trust in their situation, in their whatever, as an outcome, right? But their way of going about it was just creating more anxiety, more worry, more fear, more separation. So when we can look at that and see, oh, okay, what is a wholesome or healthy desire here? So even in some craving, we could see like, what is the craving, let's say, to act out in some unhelpful way? What's the craving there? Well, if it's really about feeling nothing, or becoming something, right? So just again, what this teaching is talking about. So okay, so if really the intention is to feel nothing, that's what the craving is, then the desire is to what? Like to feel, usually it's safe or, not suffer, right? So there can be a wholesome desire, but if we only have a kind of unhealthy or unskillful way to kind of meet that desire, then this is, again, one of those things where through meditation, we can kind of begin to gain more clarity and seeing, oh, is this healthy or unhealthy? Is it skillful or unskillful? And then we can have discernment, right? And it's not so much about like just letting go, right? But it's more like setting them down, letting them be, rather than trying to get rid of. So back to those, kind of the desires or the cravings. Yeah.
I think that phrase like really tripped me up for a while, like letting go.
Mm-hmm.
Like it felt so impossible. It felt like you had to get rid of, like you said, like get rid of something, which is like letting it be. I don't know, that phrase just makes so much more sense.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like letting something be is really what we're doing. We're not pushing it away. We're not grasping onto it. We're just letting it be. And the letting go is really just the letting go of the grasping. And then the letting it be, I kind of like think about, if you're grasping, you're not going to have the same kind of resonance, right? But if you let it be, there's more ability for it to move, there's more space. So yeah, I'm glad that resonated with you. It resonates with me too. And it made all the difference in, especially my physical awareness, my physical body practicing of this, like, okay, let go of pain. Well, how am I going to let go of pain? It's painful. Okay, let it be. Let pain just be present. Without trying to push it away or grasp it, and then see what happens. And often what happened is that it would dissipate in some way. But try it for yourself. Just that idea of and like with anxiety or with fear or with anger, we don't have to let it go, get rid of it. We can let it be, but not feed it. I mean, if we ask ourselves, like, what is letting go moment to moment, right? It's not intellectual, it's experiential. And it's the dance between kind of what's selfing or non-selfing, right? So it's part of the way to think about it. All right, well, we're just about out of time here, so I'm just recognizing that. So any last kind of thoughts, questions, comments before we end about this idea of craving and non-craving? All right. Good. So just know that there is a donation. This center is run on the donation of those who attend, and there's a bowl there, and there's a little QR code. And also, if you want to support me in my teaching, you can do so at. I was just told recently that it's not No BS Buddhist. It's really Knobs Buddhist. So it's Knobs Buddhist. And on Venmo if you want to support me. Yeah, I appreciate your time and attention, and maybe we'll kind of loop back around next week. I'll kind of finish. There's a couple more points I wanted to make, but we'll just tack them on next week and move forward with the third noble truth. All right. So any goodness that has come from our practice together, may this goodness be dedicated to the freedom from suffering for all beings, that we all be free.